Hello, everybody. Good night, I guess. If you're watching this at night, you're in for a ride. I'm here to run over some content. Well, if you're watching this video, you probably already know some stuff about the Half-Life 2 beta, I imagine. So I'm not gonna explain every single little thing. If you really want to know the whole story, I do encourage you to look up the wiki of the Half-Life 2 development and also that amazing book Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar. Here I'm just gonna go over what really spoke to me. So from starters, in the game originally, you were to start in the wasteland. That does bring a lot of similarities to Mad Max Fury Road, and it has a very similar look to it, and I think that's why it speaks so much to me. There's something about this orange tint, this very polluted sky. As crazy as this world seemed to be, it also seems lived in. You can see the train coming. This is the train where Gordon would start. In this one, you can see the dried out sea, which is a concept that did not make to Half-Life 2. The wasteland you do see for a very split moment when you're in the teleporter. I guess it would seem too extreme, but it is fascinating to me. This is another art where you can see the dried out sea in the wasteland. We don't have that orange tint here, but we do have this green tint, which also brings a lot of atmosphere. Here's the train. Again, the visual style, I don't think it would be carried over to the game, but this very brown, rusty look, like reminiscent of a past. And that's a very recurring theme in the beta version. From the train, we would get to the AirX factory. This is a big concept that was not at all present in the final version of Half-Life 2. The AirX factory would take the air and replace it. It would pollute the air with toxic gases, basically to eliminate any kind of life form. I'm very divided on this concept. I thought it was completely impractical at first, quite ridiculous, too big of an effect on the story overall, because every character we'd meet would have to be breathing from some other source. But what I found out recently, the factory would be one of the first stages of gameplay, and when we destroyed it, the air stopped being polluted. It would also be seen as a sign of the uprising. I do think it would make a very interesting effect in the story overall. Also, the concept art is beautiful. There's also that orange tint. There's a lot of that rusty metal. The second art of the AirX factory, I would easily have all these arts framed. I'm really considering it to frame some of these. It's beautiful. This one, the second one, it has that brown and orange presence, but also the little lights of green. This is beautiful. I love it. Here we see the insides of it. It's crazy how much detail they put in it. You know, there's all these cranks. It's interesting. You can see the little tiles on the wall. This is also a concept that did not carry over to the final version, but essentially the Combine is using the rubble to construct their environment. And then we get to the city. This is the station, and immediately, this is, again, I would love to see some of this darkness that we see in these concept arts. I would love to see it a little bit more carried over to the final version. When we see City 17 in Half-Life 2, it's very much bright. I think it was an interesting choice and a good choice. In this game, we would come over and see this world that was so dark. There's a lot of darkness, and there are those little lights in the backgrounds and the houses, and it feels like a world where literally darkness has taken over, and we have these little glimmers of signs of life. the architecture is not very visible, but you see it's very, very grim. It seems here. This is interesting. This looks like it's not at night, so it's not so dark. This is one of those I would love to frame. I'm really considering it. The house, the light, it feels an evening light running over it, but the night is just about to come. There's a train coming back there, so it seems the train runs through the city, and there's people around. This is something that makes me consider that would really work, the idea of the gas masks. So we see those people, those shadows, those silhouettes, and they're trying to live in this horrible world. It's I would love to see that. This seems to be daylight, crazy as it sounds. This is beautiful. I love it. It really carries over the same visual language of the previous ones. In this picture showing a little bit of the context of the city, we basically see the state of humanity. Imagine being Gordon and waking up in a world like this. It's the Half-Life 2 beta was straight up a horror game, which I think the Half-Life 1 fits a little bit more. I do think the change for Half-Life 2 was necessary, but the idea of being out for like a day, for some moments, and waking up in a world like this is so suffocating and horrifying. There's basically no civilization left. You just go from rubble to rubble. This is the concept of the gas mask citizen. I love it. I completely came around to it, you know. I thought it was interesting at first, but not efficient and not intuitive in a sense, you know. But again, the idea of walking around the city and seeing everybody wearing this, it's so fascinating. We have people enslaved working in factories in the Half-Life 2 beta, but something that was drastic, the children working. I'm very divided on this to this day because I think it's too depressive, too horrible, and the idea of Half-Life 2 that the Combine stopped us from reproducing just so they make sure that we are the last generation on Earth. I think it's more efficient. The working kids, they worked in factories, most notably in the cremator. I myself don't think it was necessary for the final version, but it does give this world of the Half-Life 2 beta an even more depressive and oppressive feel. In this next picture, we see it's basically what ended up being the Breen cast in the Half-Life 2. Dr. Breen made his announcements in that giant screen that looked actually very fancy but also very alien. In this case, in the beta, there was this very unintuitive design, which I think was the concept for a lot of creations in the beta. There is this very idea that the Combine does not care about design, they just care about the function. That's why the Citadel seems also very alien and not made to be inhabited by humans. Here's another concept of the Breencast screens. This one looks a little bit more like the 1984 world, that idea of technology and that oppressive and dystopian feel, which I think was a great inspiration for the Half-Life 2 beta, and one of the reasons that it is so different from Half-Life 2. Here we see a little bit more of the cremator. It's a very striking image. It's very disturbing. It gives this very eerie vibe to him. There's something on his belly that would look ridiculous regularly, but looks so scary. I love that about Half-Life. They want to be unsettling, so they choose some really weird design choices for their creatures. It's amazing. Here is the concept of the Manhack. What is the name of that? The Manhack Arcade, I think. This is some of those I'm also divided on, because I think it's a little bit on the nose, but because we know the people designing the game were basically trying a lot of different things, but in a lot of different ways to horrify the player. The Manhack Arcade is a place where one of the few places where the citizens of City 17 would be able to have fun and enjoy something, and they would be playing as manhacks and these little machines that would kill people for points. They were oblivious to the fact they were actually killing people that were trying to run away, fugitives from City 17. It's very powerful, you know, so I'm very divided. I don't know if it fits in Half-Life 2, but I do think it's a concept that's very powerful. Maybe should be reutilized in another game. Now let's go to the Citadel. Here in this picture we see the Citadel, the very different design of the Citadel in the beta, and also the Manhack Arcade, which is that building with the little star. So I love it, but I do think the final design of the Citadel is impervious, is amazing. Apparently it was to be organic, not entirely metallic like the final version, and those cables that hold the Citadel together still seem present here. The idea of the final version of the Citadel that makes it so interesting to me is the height, as simplistic as it sounds. I think it's 5 kilometers, right? 5 kilometers in the air, and God knows how deep on the earth. It immediately shows you that it's not human, that's not from Earth, there is something else. Here's the inside of the Citadel. I think I love the visual language again, the darkness in it. There's a little character there, which I don't know who it is. Maybe it's a Combine soldier. Seems a little bit too kind of supernatural. Doesn't look quite alien to me. Looks a little bit more like hell, for instance. Here's a aerial shot of the Citadel. It seems like it's a bigger version, this one. A little bit more similar to the Half-Life 2 version, but geometrically different, you know. It's very cylindrical, and Half-Life 2 one was not. This one is getting closer. It does not have the height, but it has a similarity on how harsh the cuts are and in the architecture. And I love this tint. I do love the final metallic blue version of the Citadel in the final game, but this idea of this rusty brown metal, it's very reminiscent of a past. I think that's why Half-Life 2 ended up making the right choice. Half-Life 2 in the end ended up being atemporal. You know, it doesn't fit in any particular time, so it feels like it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be in the far future. It's very perfect. Here we have the same idea of the tiles, but in a very symmetrical way, which I like. I think it's very much fits the Combine to use straight lines. There's no curves, there's no design, it's just straight lines. Now we're going to Nova Prospekt, and one of the most terrifying places of the game. I love this darkness in it, you know, this lighting. Again, I'm a sucker for small lighting, big darkness. I wish I would do more actually in this kind of style in my own art. I did use a little bit of it, some parts in my book. This is by far the most disturbing concept in the beta that was carried over to the final version, but I do believe it should be a little bit more explored. Here we see these metallic pods on the wall that are transforming people in stock. The idea of taking prisoners, you know, so for the humans, they're not, they don't need to be alive. And the Combine realizes that and uses them in their worst ways. So they put these people, these machines, inside there. Something so unspeakable happens. Buckets of blood splattered on the wall behind the pod. And what happened and what comes outside of that is a stalker. This is the soldier, one of the concepts of the Combine soldier without the uniform. And these were people, and they are slowly not becoming humans anymore. So we see that implant in the throat, God knows why, and some of their insides seem to be being messed with. Now we're gonna see some of the development process for the Stalker. It seems from the beginning the idea was very clear, to have a human completely deprived of its humanity. The plates covering the eyes was something that was there from the beginning, and the concept it's terrible because it's a person that was completely violated in an awful way. This is the final version. I wanted to include here just to compare with a previous version, which I think was even more horrifying. And the idea that this is a thing that functions and is alive, it's very disturbing. And it doesn't eat, apparently. He just takes nutrients from that side thing on the chest. According to the creators, it represented a moral dilemma because it's actually the victim, although it is a villain. And for the player, it is clearly a victim of the world. And this is this one is one of the things that disturbed me to my core. So not only was it to have all those things, arms cut off, legs cut off, the very malnourished body, in the end, in the beginning, I guess, it was to be a complete, an empty shell of what it once was. I would find it interesting if it was a black cover the Combine put on a body, but it basically took all the insides and then stitched it back together over its bone. I do think it should be carried over more faithfully, maybe, to the final version, although the final version itself is very terrible. To end in a little bit of a lighter note, let's go to the characters in this beta version. Not a great character to start with, but this one is the Consul. He's a previous version of Dr. Breen, and I do find him fascinating. I love Dr. Breen. I don't think he should be replaced in any shape or form. The previous idea for the Consul of him to be just this ominous presence that would simply announce how you should be, it seems also very powerful. It gives that idea of oppression, although it also seems very much like 1984. There are audio files for the beta, which include some lines from the Consul. I think I have them here.
The true citizen knows that duty is the greatest gift. The true citizen appreciates the comforts of City 17, but uses discretion. The true citizen's identity band is kept clean and visible at all times. The true citizen's job is the opposite of slavery. The true citizen conserves valuable oxygen.
The idea that he would specifically say stuff that were clearly lies repeatedly. It's basically brainwashing people. It's amazing to me. I would love to see that. This is the version of the Consul that is half machine, half man. Brain was to be transferred to, his consciousness was to be transferred to an advisor body. And I think here it was a little bit of that too. It gives that idea that the Consul really does not care about humanity, and he's doing everything he can to become a part of the Combine. That was not very much what I got from Breen, actually. Seeing repeatedly what Breen was doing and going through, I believe in Half-Life 2, he was trying his best to convince people and himself that this was going to work, I see something there that he was maybe as desperate as everyone else, but he did not want it to be in the losing side. This is the beta version of Eli. He looks badass. I really like this. I like the glasses. The glasses were not carried over to the final version. And what is the name of that in English? I don't think I can remember. It's like a hoodie. it did not carry over to the beta, but in Half-Life Alyx, it was rescued. It was brought back. So that was very nice to see. This is the beta version of Alyx. I really like this design. It looks a little bit too steampunk, which is also something that the Half-Life 2 beta seems to be inspired by. So I think it would work, but in the end, Alyx became such an amazing character. But this does seem like a very interesting concept. The bright red hair, the very dark black skin, I think would be an interesting design choice. This is the concept for our team, our protagonists. Eli, I think he has both his legs there, but has a cane. And Alyx has this alien pet. I think this is a little bit of a gimmick, I think. I prefer dog than an alien pet. Well, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this little tour through the world of the Half-Life 2 beta. A lot of people say we were robbed. I really can't tell, because Half-Life 2 is a perfect game. In this process of creation, they were really trying a lot of different things and to see what would work and would not work. And I will say that most of the time they made the right call. Subscribe for more. My channel content is random, so I can't say I will be posting stuff like this often. Maybe, but I hope you enjoyed. Bye bye.